All right, with the map adjust installed, I took the emissions analyzer in manual mode and I just played with that VREF voltage. And I started out, I think 4.85, and I just kept dropping it down. And because the ECU will use the map sensor on key on to grab a baro reading, I would have to do the adjustment, turn it off, wait about a minute, fire it back up, let everything stabilize, and see what the emissions were. I took it down to 4.0 volts. And at that time, I took it out, did another emissions test. Way lower, but I got pinging. Again, when you lower the map VREF, not only do you cut back on the fuel, which lowered the emissions, but you also advance timing. And in the process, I did get some pinging, and the NOx levels were definitely higher on that round than they were right after I did the install. Now, with the larger injectors, richer mixture, NOx levels are going to go way down because the rich mixture quenches the flame. It actually puts it out before the fuel is actually burned, which is why you have all the pollution, but you reduce peak cylinder temperatures and therefore NOx emissions. So with that in mind, another one of those tricks, I mentioned the eBay performance modules. We're going to do, so again, 95, it's old enough that we can get away with this. I'm just going to throw a 4.7 k ohm resistor in parallel with the air temp sensor, and then we'll go out and we'll retest emissions. So we're getting closer. I think the last step would be the oxygen sensor, hopefully. So let's go test and see how that turns out.
A little more background on the Jeep. It has the Napa Belden bronze terminal distributor cap, and you can see I got the ozone mod on there, and then I have peaking caps on the ignition wires so that we're getting that, you know, plasma kind of discharge. And then you follow the wires back to common ground spot down there, so they're all grounded. We have a magnetic heat exchanger, although not really part of the program. This is a super cap. It runs in parallel with the battery. And what happens is when you're in crank mode, you're drawn from the super cap. This battery is like 2.5 years out of date. Still going strong. We have the PCB mod. That's a power brake booster check valve. And then I have a filter on there. Normally that would run back to the air cleaner, but well, I have a cone style filter that I installed because I wanted to make room for something else that I did. Anyways, we have our Ford 12-hole injectors installed, and one of the things that we have to do, oh, by the way, here's where the ozone goes back, right near the throttle body, fairly even distribution. So we need to do a little tuning. Now, we had mentioned the map adjust. There's the map sensor, and then right there is the map adjust. Now, the map adjust has a hole on the end. Can we see it here? Can we see it? Right here. Something like this just goes into that hole, and now, there we go. Now we can turn this and we can adjust the VREF to the map sensor. This has an Innovate Motorsports wideband, right here, oxygen sensor installed. We're going to disable that a little bit later and put a factory oxygen sensor back in so that we can get the feedback working again. factory ECU. Yeah, over there with that wiring mess. Factory ECU didn't really like the Innovate Motorsports wideband narrowband simulated output. Another thing I did was I converted the automatic transmission to a 5-speed.
Installed that 4.7 k ohm resistor in parallel with the IAT sensor, and I took it back out. Good news, it did reduce pinging. Could barely hear any pinging, whereas before it was quite noticeable. Bad news, the emissions didn't show it. So I think it's time to just throw the oxygen sensor in there and let's get the feedback system working and then see what happens. We may have to go back and readjust, map adjust, but that's the next step.